Welcome, dear listeners, to Satanists Nextdoor. We're your hosts, Lilin Levine.
And Tommy Lilin.
Whether you're an open-minded, curious onlooker or a fellow Satanist seeking camaraderie, our goal is to share our personal experiences and delve into the intricate tapestry of Satanism in our daily lives, occasionally inviting other guests to share their unique perspectives, leaving no pentagram unturned. We'll explore how our beliefs shape our views on society, dive into struggles and triumphs we've encountered, and reveal the humanity that unites us all. So grab your favorite chalice and join us on this captivating journey. Satanist Nextdoor is ready to peel back the curtain and offer you a glimpse into our world, one captivating episode at a time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Satanist Nextdoor. So today we thought we'd lighten the mood a little bit and talk about a subject that really doesn't get a whole lot of airtime or even documentation on it. You know, you're kind of left to figure things out on your own, which is satanic parenting. You know,
can you even do that?
Demonic parents, you know.
Oh, no, it's funny. It's funny because when I was looking at different things people discuss when it comes to parenting while I was prepping for this conversation, a lot of resources came up that were religious based about being a parenting like Satan and all the awful things, and I was really taken aback by that.
Yeah, sharing knowledge with your children is a horrible thing.
Well, from a Christian perspective, a lot of them look at Satan in a very different light and feel that, although it's not really supported even in their own scriptures, Satan is all these very negative things, and yet they don't have the body count that certain other things in that book have. But that's beside the point.
Yeah. So, you know, we thought we kind of talk about it, you know, a lot from our life experience, because we are parents. We have 4 daughters. You know, our daughters are older, most of them. You know, one of them still a teenager. And, you know, when we were young Satanists and became parents, there was no TST. You know, there was COS, which we were a part of at the time. And, you know, we were pretty active members.
Yep. We had applied for and gotten approved to be grotto leaders for that program that lasted ever so small, little tiny sliver of time.
Yeah. And, but, you know, there wasn't a whole lot out there. And especially at that time, you know, parents, you know, were almost looked at as like, oh my God, you got kids, stay away. You know, it's a contagious, you know, things like that. So, you know, it was a lot of confusion, uncertainty, and as the internet's grown, as TST's gone out there, I would say one thing that I think TST has done really well is for the entire satanic community, you know, whether you're TST, COS, whatever, is I think it's made Satanism safer for people, in the sense that before TST was out there, you know, and you know, doing news interviews and things like that, people had a very different, and when I say people, I mean the general population, not the wacko radicals, which are always going to think Satanists are doing certain things. But I think the general public had a different view of what a Satanist is than they do now. So, you know, we were kind of like, well, shit, what do we do? You know, and this question even still came up when we were doing our one of our Thursday meetings with, you know, people that are just interested in Satanism, our open office meetings. And, you know, we had people bringing up the question, well, how do you treat holidays? What do you do with your kids? So obviously it's, you know, even with as many Satanists as there are out there publicly now, it still seems to be, you know, a question, especially for people new coming into Satanism. You know, how do I do this? Are my kids going to be ostracized? You know, and I think we touched on this a little bit before, And I had mentioned how we kind of took a step back from Satanism, and I got some feedback, and I think people misunderstood what I said, like, oh, you don't have to stop being a Satanist to be a parent. And no, you don't. But what I meant by stepping back was we became less active, we became less visible, for the safety of our children at the time, because there was a lot of unknown. And
you got to think, we came off the tail end of the Satanic Panic, so that was all very vivid in our minds. There was a lot of people that made false claims against individuals that had nothing to do with Satanism, and we watched those individuals be put in jail, many of whom are only just getting out now. So if you think about that in context, again, these are families that were ripped apart, people that were jailed, and they had nothing to do with Satanism, and here we are actually Satanist. And what does that look like? And no desire to shit on anyone's the way they present themselves, but Anton LaVey, who did a lot of amazing things publicly and really pushed things forward as far as modern Satanism goes, did not exactly have what I would call a parental facade. There was nothing about him that really came across as parental, unfortunately, even in real life. There was a lot of different opinions about them and the way that they approach things, and parenting is definitely one of the things people had plenty of opinions on. I didn't know him as a person. I don't individually know any of his children, so I'm not going to speak about what his actual parenting was like. But there is definitely an opinion that people held about him and about Satanism in general at that point.
And then you want to walk a fine line, because you don't want to indoctrinate your children. But that doesn't also mean that you lie to your children, about who you are. And so I should rephrase that, we have always approached things from an age-appropriate sort of information. A 2-year-old doesn't need to know you're a Satanist. They don't give a shit. They're running around still pooping in their diapers and, getting into trouble. Don't go in that cabinet. Stop climbing on the VCR, whatever. But as they get older, it kind of does become a topic, and that, again, that sort of depends on if you're public or if you've decided to go more underground and hide who you are from your family. And
I don't even want to use the word hide. If you just choose not to associate that stuff with your public life in any way, that's your choice. You get to be as public or as private with something like your beliefs as you choose to be. And I think we've often talked about that. Even when it comes to Satanism, I'm a non-theistic Satanist, but I do understand that there are theistic Satanists that exist. And again, as long as you're following my basic don't do this, if you respect bodily autonomy and you're not harming or actively causing harm to any individuals
or animals or things
an animal
like
to me is also an individual. So but I get that lots of people don't have that. But if you're not harming things in the name of your beliefs, I don't really care how you choose to interpret your beliefs.
So, a lot of, and I thought it was appropriate to do this episode now because of the time of year that it is. We are going into the quote unquote Christmas season,
family season.
And, which again, that comes up with the decision. Do you as parents celebrate Christmas like most of the people in the United States, or do you not? And then does your child feel ostracized because when they go to school and stuff like that? What, you don't celebrate Christmas? Well, who are you? Blah blah blah.
And you're also interacting with other family members at this time of year, right? So if you are in the process of deconstruction and you happen to be a parent, this is a very difficult time, because sometimes you for the better of your family, choose to involve yourself, as long as they're not toxic, with other family members who your kids love and enjoy being around, which is great, again, if it's not a toxic environment, for them to know those people and to have relationships. But sometimes you're dealing with indoctrination or things that you were exposed to, and it's hard to work on those things, especially at this time of year.
And so I think back, I mean, when it came to the holidays, specifically, we'll just, for this episode, we'll call it Christmas instead of Sol Invictus or Winter Solstice or whatnot. Because I was raised very atheist. Very, 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 very atheist. To the point that when we moved to New York and I was in elementary school, I bought a present for my aunt and it was this really pretty star that somebody was selling, and I bought it because it was a really pretty star. Turns out it was Star David. I had no idea what the Star David was. I had no idea, I had no religious exposure whatsoever, so they had a good laugh over it. And I was like, what the hell? It's a star. I didn't think anything of it. So we celebrated Christmas, but we celebrated Christmas in the sense that there was this, overweight dude on a sleigh with reindeers that did magic, and he got around the world in a night, and you got presents. And to a child, that's wow, that's cool. Again, age appropriate things here. At some point they grow out of that, especially if they use critical thinking.
And our kids, we definitely were always much more open with them, but there was that period of time where that they knew it wasn't a real thing, but it was fun to go through the motions, NORAD Santa and staying up to see that, and baking cookies and all the weird traditional stuff that we all associate now with the very commercial holiday that we all celebrate. But I think the big thing for people is they don't see Satanists as moral people
ethical,
with principles or values. How can you have kids when you're not teaching them anything? They run around like heathens and do whatever they want. And do you even like have any kind of things you teach them? And the answer is yes. And we do have morals and values and principles. When you look at it, if you just go, let's just say like COS as an example, they have principles and foundational beliefs. They actually have 11 when you look at their specific foundational values,
the rules of the
through
earth.
The rules of the earth.
Yeah.
And they talk about the different things, don't give opinions or advice unless you're asked, don't tell your troubles to others unless they're sure they want to hear them, like just basic,
don't harm children,
considerate stuff.
Don't kill animals unless you're going to eat it.
Right. Respect people's homes, respect people's space. It goes through it. So if you ever want to look, those are there. And then if you go to the Satanic Temple, then we have our 7 fundamental tenets that we use that really go over compassion, empathy toward all creatures, not just other humans, towards everything, respecting freedom, striving for justice. We have these things that we definitely feel are foundational. Now, I'm not going to pull aside a kid and say, well, these are our foundational tenets and this is how you're going to live, based on my beliefs. We don't do that.
No.
Because again, indoctrination.
Yeah, and there is a difference between indoctrination and just spreading knowledge, helping a child to understand, why should I not do this? Or, why do you wear an upside down star on your neck? Again, age appropriate conversations that you can have.
When they're younger, especially, letting kids lead the conversation. If they have a question, stick very closely to the answer specific to the question, and don't try to elaborate on it. If they have a follow-up, they're going to let you know, and that shifts as they get older and the questions become more detailed, and the responses then also become more detailed. So keeping things age appropriate, but keeping in mind that Satanism as a belief promotes the idea of individuality and encourages examination of multiple perspectives. So we keep in our mind that being open to other ways of thinking and being open to different perspectives and challenging our own perspectives as we encounter new perspectives to see whether or not it checks out is very important when you're coming from a satanic foundation. So teaching your kids critical thinking, one of the top things that we do, challenge thoughts, challenge us when we say things, not in like a douchey way, but respectfully. Like if I say, I really need you to do this, and this, and they go, I had a long day, I'm really kind of exhausted, can we like break this up a bit, why do you need it done right now? I'm not going to be mad at them for that. If they say, well, I don't have to do that crap, it's not my business. Well, great. No, you don't. You're right. You don't have to do that crap, and I don't have to provide you these extra special like things that you want to do. That thing you wanted to do on the weekend, the chores that you help with gets you that privilege that lets you go out and do those things. I don't want to work, but I do it too.
Yes.
So we all have to do things we don't always like to do, and that's just part of being a responsible person. And then you have a conversation. See, it's an open dialogue. It's not like, because I told you to.
Yeah. And the other part of parenting when it comes to Satanism is we don't have this spare the rod, spoil the child bullshit. Bodily autonomy goes through to children as well.
Yeah. From the moment they're born.
Yeah.
They are an individual human being, and you have to consider their potential wants and needs, they can't really express them. But, you know, even when it came to they struggle with just learning how to express that they have wants or needs, you know, just hearing that and trying to figure it out and working to I'm not going to crap on people that believe in letting kids cry. That's your parenting style. You're allowed to have that parenting style. But for me, it was really important for me when I would hear them to give them a few minutes and then go check and then take care of, like, try to figure out their needs. And that was important. And I've always done that from the moment they started to express themselves all the way up. That doesn't mean I don't get frustrated or feel tired myself and like, oh, you know, why do you always have to ask, you know, with this thing, just can you help me out and do what I asked you to do? And then they'll be like, but Mom.
Yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of this comes into play, a lot of parenting, you know, what decisions you make and things like that really comes into play after they've grown past the baby years, the toddler years, stuff like that. I mean, because in those years, you're basically doing the same thing. You're changing diapers, you're feeding them, you're blah, blah, blah. It's more as they start to enter into school, interact with other children, start to grow up. And then, you know, the either questions start coming as to, and again, this really depends on if you're public or if you just kind of keep things on the down low or whatnot. And do you even expose your children to it? You know, do your children, as they start to become teenagers, do your children know you're a Satanist, or do they just know that mom and dad don't believe in anything? You know, and so there's a lot of schools of thought on that. And some people are really, really strict where they're like, well, if you tell them you're a Satanist, you're indoctrinating them. And no, that's not true. Indoctrination is you are going to church on Sunday or else you are grounded and blah, blah, blah. It is not educating. Educating is different than indoctrination. And that tends to sometimes be a point of conflict with people. And I notice that it becomes a point of conflict with people who do not have children versus people who have children. So I would say if you do not have children, it's really hard for you to tell people who have children because you have no experience. You don't understand what that's like. You've never been there. So...
But back to like the point, critical thinking encourages you to challenge things that you don't agree with. And one of the biggest things I think we've worked hard to do is encourage our kids to challenge even us, to tell them that just because someone's older than you, it doesn't mean that they're inherently smarter or more capable.
Or right.
And it's okay to let people earn your respect. I hated forever, you know, myself as a kid, when people would just act like you owe respect to whatever adult happens to be in the room. And I get it that there's some lived experience that someone older than you has, but for me, respect is something one earns. Mm-hmm. And just because you're older does not mean you're worthy of respect.
Yeah, because there's older people that do bad things.
Horrible things.
To children, and because kids are taught, you just do what grown-ups say, you know, it puts them in a bad situation with a person like that. And you should, according to us, as we were parents, we always taught our kids to challenge. If something doesn't sound right, then challenge it.
Yeah, or if something feels wrong, or if somebody says something to you, don't be afraid to tell us, because, you know, no matter what a person might tell you can happen if you share that information, it's better to do that and know that we're going to be here to support you no matter what. And you develop that really early. So that's another great thing. Satanic parenting, for me, bodily autonomy means being able to set healthy boundaries, and that even goes all the way down to whether or not a relative can hug you. Mm-hmm. And if you feel uncomfortable, you can give me a look or a signal if you don't feel comfortable speaking out. A lot of kids don't. And then I step in and go, oh, you know what? We really just have to get going, and then like scoop them up and like move, where they get to avoid, you know, Aunt Linda's pinchy cheek hug or whatever weird smoochy thing somebody does that they just don't like, because your body is yours.
Yeah.
And you get to decide if you want people even a hug, you know, and teaching them that they have the right to have boundaries and that people aren't allowed to violate those boundaries.
Yeah, even if they're an adult, doesn't give them a right to violate a child's boundaries. And that is, you know, I know that's very different from what your traditional Christian or whatnot will teach, because, you know, they're going to teach the adult is, you know, they have all the say and you do what the adult says and blah, blah. And if you don't like it, well, maybe that's, you that you need to work on your own issues. And, you know, it might not be an issue that I don't really want Aunt Linda to come over and give me a big bear hug, pinch my cheeks, and do all the stupid shit that they do. You know, I mean, that's just, sometimes if you don't want somebody touching you, that's okay. You know?
And that's just, you know, you're teaching them from a young age foundationally that they have the right to have boundaries. And I don't think society teaches that enough, that kids have a right to say no from very early on. People discourage kids from speaking back or saying no. And I've always had a problem with that. Part of it's probably because I did not have the best upbringing. And I went through a lot of different, you know, group homes and stuff like that, where, you know, you don't have a voice and you don't have a say and you just have to do what everyone tells you. And that's it's very difficult to live under that kind of weight where you have wants and needs that are normal and valuable, but nobody cares about them if it doesn't fit what it is that they're trying to accomplish. So for me and teaching my kids, it was so important that, you know, when we were raising them, that we both gave them the opportunity to speak up, whether or not we agreed with it. You know, sometimes they'd say, like, you know, I can throw a shoe at you if I'm mad. You know, little kids are going to do things like that. And then it's about how do you respond to that?
Yeah, no, you can't, because, you know, one, that's disrespectful to the other person, and two, you're looking to hurt the other person, and so that's not okay. And that's where you have actual conversations with children. The one thing that I can remember is when our children were younger, and I would say even as young as 6, I remember a very specific situation, because we talked to our children like humans. You know, we didn't we didn't like make stupid this is your woo woo, and, you know, or, you know, all sorts of things that parents do with kids to try, but we talked to our children like they were people. And we had a friend who was a smoker at the time. And I remember our oldest daughter was in the room talking to him, and she started having a conversation. Well, why do you smoke? And it wasn't in a mean way or, you know, like trying to shame him. She was trying to understand, why do you smoke? And he was like, well, I smoke because of this. And they went back and forth. And like 15 minutes into this conversation, he was like, wait a minute, you're like 6. You know?
Yeah.
But he was having a grown-up type conversation, and it just like blew their mind that, well, wow, this 6-year-old is talking to me in the same level that an adult normally would.
It was funny because it was kind of like a early addiction intervention conversation, and like she's really going in this like, well, you know, there's better ways to deal with stress and frustration, and I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. But she would have these really great points, and she's still really a very communicative person to this day, and if you sit and talk with her, you will definitely understand their position and learn. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the cool part about being a parent for me, especially as a Satanist, because I encourage those, you know, wild thoughts and push them to explore what they're curious about and support it. And the other thing we often get asked, well, how do you deal with other religions?
I was just about to go there.
That's a fantastic question. Well, how do we deal with it is if we don't have enough knowledge on it ourselves, the specific question that they want to have an answer to, we try to find reputable people that are already part of that religion to talk to. Yeah, we actually go and talk to people that are of different beliefs, because as interfaith community members, we definitely want to be involved with other faiths and other individuals. And so we brought our children to mosques. We brought our children to Buddhist temples. I don't know if we found a synagogue. I don't know if at the time there was one in our area, but that one definitely we would be, you know, as many things as we could bring them to, we brought them to.
Especially if they had curiosity. And this is kind of getting into the young teenage sort of years when children are starting to have these sort of thoughts. Why am I here? What's the
Jeffrey goes to this thing with their parents, and what is that about? Or, you know, so-and-so said they have to pray at lunch, and why do you do that? And actually we had that conversation much younger, because we actually had our first kids here in Texas, and some of their playgroup friends, I remember this distinctly, before they were even in school, the one little girl had to pray before they could have a snack. When we would go to the park, we'd do play dates. And the mom constantly, like, you have to pray before you can have a snack. And my daughter says, why do they do that? That's so weird. Like, do you have to ask permission to eat the snack from God? I was like, well, no, it's a whole different thing. And we had a whole conversation about prayer and why they ask, to give thanks and the different things that are involved in that. And I said, if you have questions, you should ask their mom. Like, why do you guys pray before you eat? And so encouraging them to understand, what is your perspective? Why do you do this? So we would have those conversations pretty early on. And again, sticking to the question and not trying to go past it, letting them come to you with the follow-up.
Yeah. I mean, so as Satanists, most of us understand what it's like to be ostracized, and even ostracized from your own family. And the one thing one of the things that I never wanted my children to feel was any sort of ostracization for any choices that they made. So, they knew that if they wanted to explore a certain religion, we would fully support them. It wasn't, even though we were Satanists, if they wanted to go to a Christian church and go to youth group, they could do that. And we would answer questions. They would come back and answer questions. And, sometimes we had to have conversations with other family members because they would make comments that were definitely on the indoctrination or the, trying to scare children into it. We had their grandparents tell them that, when mom and dad die, you will never see them again because they don't believe in God and Jesus. And I had to have a pretty stern phone call with my parents on that one, which is, again, odd because, as I said, I was raised atheist. They just kind of went as they got older. And I had to put boundaries in there for, this, you can't say that sort of shit to my children. You can answer their question as long as you're doing it in a way that isn't, you got to think to a child. If you say you're never going to see your parents again, that is scary.
Oh, that's terrifying.
That's terrifying to a child. Or it was like, if you can't or feel like you aren't able to do that without dredging in your indoctrination, then tell them to ask their parents and we'll answer the question for them or for you. And so it is really important. As a Satanist, I feel it's very important that your children know that they have support, whether they're straight, whether they're whether they're on the LGBTQIA spectrum, whether they're exploring other religions, anything like that, they should have the support of their parents and not be ostracized.
Yeah, I've always personally had an issue with the notion that as a parent, you have the right to put all of these boundaries in. I really think when you love your child, you accept them however they are. You don't have all these weird expectations. And I guess I've never personally been able to understand the boundary love thing that a lot of parents have. If my child is gay, straight, interracial, whatever the hell it is that they choose to do with their life, you want to have an interracial relationship, cool. Is your partner a good person? Do they love you? Do they respect you? That's all I care about. Yeah. I don't care where they come from. I don't care how they look. I don't care what their gender is. I don't care about any of that. Are you happy? Do they treat you good? Do you treat them good? Are you guys happy together? In the end, are they respecting you? And that goes for everything. Are you in a belief system that respects you, that supports you, that encourages you, that you feel you can grow in? And so those are the kind of things that matter to me. Same when they just, decide what career they want to go into. Is this satisfying to you? Do you feel like it's something that you can grow with? Do you, have other aspirations? How can I support you? That's what, to me, parenting is.
Yeah. I remember we had one of our kids that when she was a teenager, she started going to youth group on a pretty regular basis. And we supported her and all that. But I asked her once, I was like, out of curiosity, what are you getting out of this? Why are you going? And she was like, oh, well, they give out candy and I don't care about their bullshit beliefs. I don't believe them. I just, they give out candy and food. So I'm going to take their candy and food because if they're going to give out free candy and food for that, then, hey, I'm going to do that. And I get to hang out with some of my friends and, play some games. But, and I was like, okay, but you do understand that if that interest you, that's okay. You know, we're not going to be mad or upset or anything like that. And she was like, oh, no. I totally get that. I'm really there for the candy.
Yeah.
I was like, okay,
and they would
cool.
do pizza and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, well, if you're happy with it, do it. But it's funny because that is definitely, we would never have had a problem with it. We were really curious because you never heard about it or really saw anything about it. And so I was like, so what do you guys do? What is it? And then she went through the whole thing. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Normally when somebody is starting to be indoctrinated, you can kind of tell because they start to talk about it all, you know, and, you know, they bring it up all the time. They try and convert other people and stuff like that. And none of that was happening. So it was just really a question of curiosity as far as, you know, out of curiosity, why are you going? Well, okay, candy, pizza, that all makes sense to me. Cool. Well, go as much as you want. And if you want to stop going, and stop, you know, that's up to you. Just let us know what support you need from us, and we're there for you.
Yeah. And we'll be the first ones to say, you know, we did not do everything perfect. We definitely had areas where we definitely could have improved early on. But we were young when we started into parenting, and we learned a lot along the way. And then as we look forward to being grandparents, which is something that actually will be happening, oddly enough, in our life, it's now how do we then take what we've learned and use that and help with our kids with parenting, or use that to help in raising, you know, our grandchild. So I'm very excited about that chapter. But, you know, I think it comes back to the whole thing on indoctrination and how you avoid it, and just being the best support and being the most loving person, and, you know, guiding and providing a sounding board when things maybe aren't healthy or good or are concerning, knowing how to tactfully have that conversation. Because I'll tell you what I learned as a parent is the minute you tell them, like, don't do the thing, they're going to do the thing. They're going to
do the thing, yeah. And I mean, like you said, we were really young we were adults, but we were still young adults, you know, very inexperienced. Both of us kind of had, I mean, you had a really, really fucked up childhood. And I had I had a fucked up childhood in a different way. You know, so when we became parents, and the whole question, do we stay active as Satanists and not? At that time, I think we made the right choice.
Yeah.
At this time, I probably would have done it a little different. But again, that's because I feel like TST has made Satanism safer in general, you know. But there's still aspects that, you know, I look back at and you know, I don't know how I would be right now coming out of the gate if we were having our first child and we were very young. Again, you know, there's not really a manual out there for it. I know what I used to guide me was all the things my parents did that sucked. I kind of said, I'm never doing that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I stuck by that, you know, pretty well. And I know there was a point where, you know, you were interested in Christianity, and it was more of a community, because being a Satanist can be lonely, especially pre-TST, pre-internet, pre-social media and pre-TST.
Yeah, I was about to say, we had internet forums and stuff, but COS is, for all the things that they do have, and they do have a community, they do have groups that get together, they do some events. I'm not going to say there aren't things that they do things. It's just very different. And the thing I love about TST is, you know, we have congregations. Congregation leaders get to kind of set the pace based on what their community wants and work with their community to try and bring those things to life. And then, you know, as congregation heads, our responsibility is to hear those things and do what we can to push for them. And that's the cool dynamic, right? So you build that community, you create it into something that becomes a safe, fun environment for individuals to then experience Satanism and have what a lot of other religions bring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so that was sort of the reason why you started exploring that at one point.
Well, those folks seemed so happy, and honestly, they seemed like they had a great support system. The kids were all involved. There was a lot of things from the outside that seemed really interesting about it, and it was something I didn't really have any experience with. So, you know, we had moved, and we were in a new place. I believe I was invited to some of the Bible studies by my neighbor at the time, who was a lovely woman. And, it kind of went from there where I was just really curious. But the whole time it was a lot of, sometimes they would get frustrated because I'd always ask a lot of questions, which I think was kind of the downfall of why it was a long period, but it was also very short. It was only a couple of years.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme, it's not long, but it was...
It was long enough.
Yeah, it was long enough. And of course, being the overachiever that I am, I had to choose some evangelical churches, right? Because those are the ones that you definitely want to try out when you're exploring something. And so that may have probably been a bit of a color into what my experience was. Though I did know some folks that were Methodist and Lutheran and got to hang out with them and have conversations. And I have to say they were a lot more down to earth and open-minded and interesting to interact with.
Yeah, but I mean... I heard this a long time ago when I first started exploring Satanism, and I heard it again. I've heard it in COS, I heard it in TOS, and I heard it in, just about every left-hand path, is once you've gone down the left-hand path, it's kind of like you've poked holes in that veil. It's really hard to put that veil back on and be blind to everything that your eyes were open to before about, all the bullshit. And it is really hard to just accept and swallow all that bullshit that comes along with, religion like that.
Well, and even, our kids who were all pretty much still young when we started doing that, they were not very excited about it. They did not enjoy a lot of they went to the classes, they did the Sunday school thing. I mean, they tried it, we all tried it, and they just were very underwhelmed with their experience. And not because we weren't really giving it a good go, we did. It just didn't make sense. We tried to make sense of it. It just really, the community was cool. A lot of the folks were great people, provided you believed as they did. Once it became clear that we weren't necessarily in line with that, a lot of them, slowly kind of pulled back.
Yeah.
And then we were like, screw that.
Because I know with me and even with you, our core beliefs never really changed, and which is why we would ask so many questions, and we would poke holes in this or that or this or that. And we just, I don't think, when I look back at that part of our lives, we truly weren't happy, because we were trying. And it really was, again, you have to understand the time, no social media, no real contact with other Satanists other than maybe an IRC channel or something like that,
Yeah, and I mean, I think towards the end it was like MySpace was still going, but it was starting to end, and there was like early Twitter maybe, but there really wasn't still like identified communities in that way. So yeah, there were conversations out there, but there was a lot of interesting, I mean, you'll find them still today. There's some interesting folks that call themselves Satanists, but
Yeah. So all that being said, I think now I probably would have approached it a bit different than back then, because back then it really is a safe, are my kids going to be ostracized? I would say the current generation is a lot more accepting, inclusive is the word I should use, than they were back in the day.
And I would say approachable. I think Satanism now, with a lot of the work that TST has put into it, there is a community that is available and present and out there doing things, and people can see what they're doing. And so it's not such a mystery. What are they? What are they all about? What are they doing?
Are they killing cats at midnight?
Yeah,
drinking babies'
are the things
blood?
true?
Again, you're never going to get away from that with radicals.
No.
I still hear to this day, people still message me and tell me how I'm murdering babies and drinking their blood and all of that sort of stuff. And, I guess I got a really bad case of sleepwalking or something because, I just don't remember any of that shit.
No.
Yeah.
But no.
But yes, as parents, your job is to help guide and support your children. I would say that's the most important part of being a parent. And I don't think that changes whether you're a Satanist or you're an atheist or, even if you're other religions, just other religions push you into indoctrination for your children, whereas Satanism is very much against indoctrinating children.
Yeah.
And again, then you go back to the argument of
What is
indoctrination
I'm
and
gonna
what is not.
snatch up a little airtime here because there was something I read that really stuck with me by a neuropsychologist named Nicholas Humphrey, and he had this. He did an Oxford Amnesty lecture quite some time ago. And what he said really, I think, captured it best. And I'm going to just go through like the smaller segment of this. But he said, children, I'll argue, have a human right not to have their minds crippled by exposure to other people's bad ideas. No matter who those other people are, parents correspondingly have no God-given license to enculturate their children to whatever ways they personally choose, no right to limit the horizons of their child's knowledge, to bring them up in an atmosphere of dogma and superstition, or to insist they follow the straight and narrow paths of their own faith. In short, children have a right not to have their minds addled by nonsense, and we as a society have a duty to protect them from it. So we should no more allow parents to teach their children to believe, for example, in the literal truth of the Bible, or that the planets rule their lives, than we should allow parents to knock their children's teeth out or lock them in a dungeon. And I really thought, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So you have to carefully consider what it is you're exposing your kids to, and you have to give them the opportunity to challenge that and to have an opinion and to have a voice and to teach them to use that voice and to speak for themselves.
Yeah. And, as our children grew up, as they become teenagers, as they become young adults, obviously they knew who mom and dad are now. They know that, every single one of our children now know that we're Satanists. They're all 15 and above. Some of them are in their 20s. There's no use of hiding that, and we always had a library of various books, from everything from sci-fi to some satanic books, all sorts of stuff, which was accessible to our children if they were interested in reading them, and again, we would answer questions. As they became teenagers, they did become more curious as far as, hey, what is this thing y'all do? And we would always, as we explained things, always make sure they understood, look, just because we follow this path does not mean you need to follow this path, doesn't mean you need to be interested in it, doesn't mean you need to do anything. You be you. And if it interests you, cool, I'll answer questions for you. Really, I don't think you should join any religious organization until you're about 18 and can make your own mind up. But that doesn't mean as a teenager, sometimes TST congregations will have family-friendly events. Obviously that's not a black mass. Right.
Well, and then if you look at like the recent thing we were involved in with the Protect Children Project, where if you affiliate, that doesn't mean you're necessarily a full-fledged member, but if you as a youth affiliate with Satanism and identify as a Satanist, then you have the right to the same protections religiously that you would for other things. I mean, for me, and this is me speaking as me, for me, when you have parents out there pushing their kids to like not get vaccinations or things that are healthy and important for them, and then you have religious exemptions for that, what I like is, as a Satanist, you have the right to not have things pushed on you. You have the right to use the bathroom. You have the right not to be struck in school. You have the right not to be restrained. These are things that are based on that, again, bodily autonomy that I always say is so important because it applies to just about everything in your life. As a younger person, having the right to have the backing of a religious organization. Some people use that negatively, right, for certain other things, to have the backing of a religious organization and say, no, you're not going to violate these young people. They have rights too.
Yeah. I mean, because me, myself, I got interested in Satanism and I read the Satanic Bible before I was 18. I kind of knew I identified in that way before that. I just couldn't join anything until I was 18. And I understand that. But it would have been nice to at least be able to say, and I remember even as a teenager, I would still claim that I was a Satanist. But that was me, myself. I consciously made that choice. I didn't need a red card to prove that or to officially be a Satanist, and as a child or a teenager, I should say, if a teenager has done their own research and has made up their own mind, then great, they can do that, because the wonderful thing about being human is you can change your mind. And as long as your children know that you're going to support them as they go through different phases, as they explore themselves, and, as they explore who they are, that's the most important thing, because somebody might identify as a Satanist as a teenager, and then when they get a little bit older, they might say, you know what, I don't identify as that anymore. Now I'm this. And people will take their whole lives to go through religious, what are the discoveries? Some people, it takes them a long time, and that's fine. And
It should.
It should. And you should always challenge, even as long as I've been a Satanist, I should still challenge myself. Does this still fit for me? And that's the one thing that, that's one of the other things we try to, as parents, instill in our children is, continue to challenge yourself, continue to educate yourself, and know just because you identify as whatever, be it religion or something like that, that doesn't mean you're stamped with that for the rest of your life. Use your critical thinking skills and understand you can change that. And us as your parents, we're going to love you anyways.
Yeah, conditional love, like I said, really trips me up. I don't understand it. I get people have boundaries, limitations, preferences. I get all that. That's fine. But when it comes to being a parent, your kids never, to be fair, chose you as parents. There was no way for them to. So you're kind of obligated to be the best parent you can be and give them the best experience you can so that you can send them out into the world to be confident individuals that have the skills they need to start life. That's your whole entire goal, and hopefully a life better than yours.
Yeah. And so, like I said, this subject comes up, from time to time as we talk to new people, sometimes even as other satanic parents meet and talk to each other. How did you do this? Why did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. But around the holidays, it can become even more so because then you're interacting not only with your own children, but a lot of times people are interacting with other family members. And how do I do this? Do we put a Christmas tree up or not? And, my answer is kind of like, well, do you want a Christmas tree? Mm-hmm. Are your children interested in a Christmas tree?
It's okay to have like what people consider traditional celebrations and traditional, activities too. It's fine to put up a tree. It's fine to put up, pictures of Santa or to talk about fun things like that. Or it's fine to have these kind of traditions. Just because you're a Satanist doesn't mean you can't have these traditions.
Yeah, I mean, the Christmas tree and stuff was stolen anyway, so,
That's a whole other, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of did
we
an
had that
episode on that, but yeah, I mean, so a lot of things were stolen anyway, so, claim them back if you want to.
Yeah, we also, we've talked about, we know lots of pagan individuals, and they also do very different celebrations. You can join in with those folks, enjoy those celebrations, involve your kids, celebrate Yule, celebrate solstice, go to some of these events, and stop by the library, pick up some cool book. I know maybe your library is not as accepting to these things, but go to the library and pick up some cool books about different types of celebrations and share that with your kids. Ask them what they like. Create your own traditions.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one year I even tried to be, I tried to have different members of family over, and I tried to be
the encompassing celebration.
Sort of an encompassing, all-inclusive celebration. I said, we are going to celebrate Christmas, Yule, solstice, Sol Invictus, whatever the hell you want. We are going to celebrate that. If you want to go in the corner and pray before your food, do that. If you don't. And as we celebrate, we're just supposed to be celebrating the company of each other, the joy of family and all of that sort of stuff. And I think it worked well for some, and it did not work well for my very Christian parents who...
I argue, though. I argue that it didn't work well because I think having the opportunity to do it, right? Being open to it, letting the kids participate in all those different things, choose how they want to participate, letting your parents know it's fine for them to pray. I don't care if you pray in my house. It's not like we're going to burst into flames or anything like that. So go ahead. It's your call. Do it. The only time I've ever had a problem with their specific religious beliefs, the way that they interpret them, is like there was this very sort of, I guess, backhanded crap on their whiteboard where it's like, must pray for so and so and their family for them. I was like, okay, that's a little
yeah, that's a little much.
I don't
because
care if you pray. I don't care if you invite my kids to pray with you because,
as long as you
option.
give them the freedom to say no and don't hold it against them or make them feel pressured.
Right.
Because that's sort of where we gave our kids like almost a safe word, which is kind of sad that you have to do that when it comes to really radical religious people. But, if they didn't want to do something, they could either say something or throw us a look or something like that. And then we would intervene and say, you know what, they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so
because
you guys go do what you're going to do. And, we're going to be hanging out here. And when you're done, we're still all going to be hanging out here and you can spend more time with your grandkids.
Yeah. But that's, again, like, the important thing is empowering your kids to learn to be confident, and that's a great way to build that confidence, is to help them understand that they do have the right to enforce boundaries, even as a kid, and that just helps them to grow in that and be more able to speak for themselves and on their own behalf eventually. Maybe they don't, but kids are supposed to be learning, and being afraid to confront a difficult situation is very natural. Helping to encourage them, if you are uncomfortable, you can say something, letting them know, like, you have a voice. Mm-hmm. But if you're not comfortable enough, then we can step in. But you do want to help them to start to do their own speaking up. That doesn't mean you force them into, tell them to go fuck themselves. Obviously, you're not telling your kids to do that. What you're saying is, you're okay to say, I'd rather not, or no thank you, or do it that way. But if you really just don't feel like you enjoy this, because it's a very confrontational situation for a kid,
Yep.
Then just let us know and we'll intervene. And we've done that before. I know they got invited to like a dinner or something with your parents, and I think they meant well because it wasn't during normal church hours, but it was at the.
They knew.
I'm just saying, in their own way, they thought it was a happy medium, right? So they invited the kids to this spaghetti dinner
at church.
That was at the church property, but it wasn't during church hours. But the church folks were going to be there, but it wasn't about prayer. And this is the explanation they're giving us. And so the kids kind of said, hey, I got this invitation. I really don't want to do it. And I'm not sure how to approach it because I could tell they really want to hang out. And I want to hang out with them too, but I don't want to do it here. So then, me being me, and if you guys know me, I went ahead and sent a message, pretty direct. So, hey, the kids mentioned that you guys want to do this thing, and I know we've talked about it, but they don't want to go to church or, be on the church, property or do the event. And they were like, well, it's not church function because even though it's at the church, they're not doing anything formally. I said, no, but it's on the church property.
It's on the church property. It's run by the church people. It is an event put on by the church. So, yes.
Yeah, I get that you don't see it as a church function because it's outside of the normal hours, which is fine.
But it's still a church function.
But they're going to still probably have some of the very normal associated events, and the kids really just would rather not. So can we schedule something at different point? And this led to a whole thing.
Yeah.
It really did. It became back and forth text messages that turned into emails that turned into an actual physical meeting, which went less than stellar. We've talked about that meeting. Where I may have slipped and said, well, I'm a Satanist, so this forgiveness method that you're talking about is completely foreign to me because forgiveness is action and I don't just forgive. And that became a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I would say as parents, you also have to, part of your job is to protect your children and to realize when something is going on. And we noticed something very early on as we were trying to allow our children to have a relationship with their grandparents, is that the only night they wanted them to sleep over was Saturday night. And it did not take very long for me to figure out, okay, the only reason why they want them to sleep over is so that they can bring them to church in the morning. Mm-hmm. Which again, I was okay with my children going to church if they wanted to go to church. But when it crosses over into indoctrination, that's when I was not okay with it. And I was like, y'all are retired, so you can literally have the children over any night of the week. It's not like you have to get up, go to work in the morning or anything like that. So it becomes pretty transparent when the only night is Saturdays. And that's when, again, as parents, we had to step in and just kind of call bullshit to that.
Well, and to be fair, at first we were fine because the kids were fine with it. And so we were fine with it.
But they became uncomfortable.
What they weren't necessarily telling us, and again, kids don't feel comfortable articulating things, even to you, even if you've been safe and listen and all those things, you know, you have to check in with them because they don't feel comfortable sharing certain things. It's just the way they are. So it became apparent when our, you know, second youngest, so we've got 2 older, 2 younger. And so the older of the 2 younger ones says, they make me get up early. I don't like doing it. They get really mad and frustrated when I don't want to do it because I'm not awake or I don't want to. So it was pretty clear that not only were they getting them up early and bringing them to church, but they didn't actually want to go.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much making them feel like it was rude of them to be there and they were obligated to participate. And that is exactly what I didn't want to have happen. So when they made it clear, you know, this is what's happening, this is how I feel, this is how they're making me feel, then we addressed it at that point.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's, again, as a Satanist and a parent, it's, you know, not all that difficult. You know, I just keep going back to, you give your children support. You know that you're there for them. And that includes even in school. You know, I mean, we taught our children the same thing that, you know, TST, we had the demonstration about up in Dumas.
Before TST even had this program, we were out there teaching our kids.
We were already teaching our kids this. You know, if you need to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom. You know, if the school gets pissed at you, have them call me. You know, you're never going to get in trouble at home.
Unless you're abusing the privilege.
Right. You know, so as long as you're not like abusing, you're not skipping class on purpose to go to the bathroom and hang out in the bathroom the whole time. You know, if you have to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. If the school gets you in trouble, well, fuck the school. You're not going to be grounded here or anything like that. And I remember our second oldest daughter, when she was in high school, she was like, hey, I need to use the bathroom to the teacher. And the teacher said no, which always baffled my mind. I'm like, you know, in this day and age, you know, we're not training children to be in the 1920s factory line where, you know, you have to stand on a line for 8 hours before you can take a pee break or something like that. You know, most every job I've ever had in my life, from McDonald's to whatever, if I had to go pee, I could go pee, you know. And so she stood up and the teacher said, what are you doing? And she said, look, I have to go pee. So either I'm going to pee in the trash can here in front of the class, or I'm going to go to the bathroom and go pee. You make your choice. Tell me which one you want me to do. And knowing this daughter of ours, she would have actually peed in the trash can in front of the class.
Yes, she would have. That's one of the things I love about her. She's my very bold, very outspoken one. And
the teacher, you know, let her go to the bathroom, and there was no, you know, we never got a phone call or anything like that. The schools learned really early. The schools learn if you are an active parent and you stick up for your children, and you don't let them do the bullshit that they try and pull with other kids, they learn really quick that it's kind of pointless to call you. They're not going to make any progress. Like
when we probably already mentioned this one, like when the
phone situation.
The phone situation happens. So our second youngest, they said they were in school and it was during a period they were allowed to kind of look at their phones on and off, but they had picked it up, I guess, in a period where they weren't necessarily supposed to because they were checking something. I think it's because they weren't feeling good and they were trying to reach out to me.
Yeah.
But they picked up the phone and the teacher's like, well, you know, I'm going to take up your phone and you need to let me into the phone. And then hilarity ensued.
Yeah, I get a phone call from the principal at school, and the principal's like, we have so-and-so here in our office with us. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, you know, she used her phone in class. She wasn't supposed to. And when we asked her for her phone and to give us access to her phone, she denied us, said, no, do you have a warrant? Mm-hmm. And so there was a pause. And I said, well, do you have a warrant? And then there was a really, really long pause from the principal. And she said, no, I don't think you understand. I said, no, I don't think you understand. Look, if my child uses a phone when they're not supposed to, that's fine. Write her a detention. You can do that. You can tell her to take her phone and put her phone away. If she doesn't listen, you can discipline her by giving her a detention or whatever it is. But you do not have the permission to open up her phone and go through her phone. Why would you need to go through her phone? Well, we wanted to see who she was talking to or what she was doing on the phone, if she was cheating or something. I was like, is this during a test? No. Okay. Then again, why are you wanting to go through? It's just a power trip that the schools get into sometimes. And I was like, look, again, I'll support if y'all want to give her a detention, give her a detention. But you don't touch that fucking phone unless you have a warrant. And that was the last time they called me about anything like that.
True story. It's weird. And there's many different instances where the schools have done some very shady things. Our oldest one had a teacher actually throw away a project and pretend they didn't get the project turned in. And then I made them pull up the video, which happened to be, and then the teacher got caught lying. I mean, again, just because they're an adult and they're older than you does not make them honest or
doesn't make them
correct
right,
or people that deserve your respect. Adults can be just as crappy as anybody else. And as a kid, learning that early is very important. To identify people that are good or bad based on how they treat you and how they behave is a very important skill.
Yep. And with our oldest, it was because she was gay. She was openly gay in high school. And so the teacher was trying to pull a fast one and basically make her get a 0 on her final exam, which was a project she put together.
What they didn't expect is that I would fly practically up to the school and directly telling them that they're going to have me with the principal immediately. I needed a meeting immediately with them, and then this was going to be sorted. They did not expect that kind of like ferocity to just hit them in their doorstep. So I just showed up. We're going to do this. I need to know about this. This is what happened. What are we doing? And they were, to their credit, the administrator immediately pulls up the video, immediately sees that, in fact, it was turned in, and then handled the situation. And again, this is how screwed up this was. It was found behind the trash. So it was a big poster board that they had worked on all the last
this isn't like
days.
A little
It was a big thing that they put under the door because the teacher told them they had to turn it in, and they weren't in the classroom. The door was closed, so they put it under the door. And the trash wasn't right by the door where they may have accidentally pushed it when the door opened. It was up by a table against the blackboard area, and so, or whiteboard. They don't really use blackboards anymore.
The other the teacher actually had another teacher next door that lied too, and said that our daughter was never in the hallway before 7:30 because she was standing out there the whole time.
Yes,
and
they didn't expect them to run the tape.
They didn't realize. I guess people still are dumb enough to not realize you're on video almost anywhere you go, anything you do now, especially in the school. So it was really easy to kind of prove that one and show them both on video and show the teacher on video and all that. So it is important, again, that's another life skill.
Listen to your kids.
Yeah. One, listen to your children when they talk to you and they tell you something. I mean, it's also important for children to understand. And when I say children, again, she was a teenager, but she's still a minor, to understand that just because an adult does something doesn't make it right. Mm-hmm. And just because another adult backs up that adult doing something wrong doesn't make it right. And if you know you're in the right, that your parents will always support you.
Well, hopefully. And that's what I hope.
Well,
not as a Satanist. I would hope as parents, give your kids the benefit of the doubt and understand growing up is hard. Figuring out your place in society is hard. Knowing who you are, I still don't even always know who I am. And I'm a whole ass adult. So, give them a little leeway. This is a very challenging period of their life. Remember what it was like for you.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think a lot of parents, they get this amnesia. They forget what it was like to be a child. They forget what it was like to be a teenager. And then the other thing that I see a lot of parents do is they live vicariously through their children because they weren't able to do this. They forced their child into doing something their child doesn't want to do. You have to join the cheer squad because I had always wanted to be on the cheer squad and I didn't get that opportunity. So you have to do it. Well, you have to do it is the problem there. Right. Now, if the child's interested in it, sure, support them and all of that sort of stuff. But as a parent, you don't live vicariously through your children. That's wrong.
No, it's fine to counsel
allow your children to be their own individuals.
Right. You can say, I really enjoyed choir. Maybe you want to look at that as an option for electives, or I really liked this specific class. And then your kid goes, well, I hate choir. I have no interest in singing. And it's just like the worst thing you could possibly offer up as an option. Then you go, okay, cool. What are you interested in doing?
Yeah. What else can you do? What else do you want to do?
Yeah.
You want to do art? Okay, cool. I will support you with that. you know, and understand that things change. Sometimes somebody's interested in something and then they start to do it and they realize they don't like it. You know, it's happened to me. I know I've done stuff that I thought I liked. And then when I started doing it, I realized I didn't like it. You know, and imagine somebody forcing you to say, well, you pick that, you have to go all the way through. That's not being supportive. You know, that's again,
right.
You know,
I mean, but it's a fine line, right? You want to encourage them because, you know, the inclination to quit when things are difficult definitely happens.
Yes.
So you want to help them to learn that you can work through difficulties. So you ask them, why is it you don't like it? What is it about it you don't like? Is this something that you can try and work through? But if it's something obviously I thought I would like it, it just really doesn't interest me. I'd like to go to something else.
Yeah.
You know, if the answer from wherever is, well, right now we can't change it, but at this point you can, then it's, you know what? We're going to have to see it through to this, and then you can change. Or sometimes it's, you know, support your kids in the art of quitting when something isn't healthy or working for them. That's something not enough people do. It's okay to fail at something. It's okay to learn from that experience. It's okay to know what your limits are and to stand by that. People do it with work. Sometimes you'll stay in a job or a relationship or different things that aren't healthy because you feel like you have to, that it's something you have no choice in. And teaching someone early on how to navigate that reality is so important. And so letting them know failing is normal. And what did you learn from that? And what did you figure out about yourself? And what can you take from that and move forward? Or knowing that you can have an out. Like, I just don't really enjoy this and I don't want to do it. I thought I would. It's okay. You figured that out. That's all that matters.
And failure is a learning point. That's the other thing that we taught our children. Failure
is an opportunity.
Yeah. And it's what you do with that failure that matters. I mean, you look at the most successful people in life, they failed. They failed multiple times. It's what they did with that failure and what they learned from that failure. So if you keep failing the same way over and over and over and over and over again, then you've got a problem. But if you fail, and so many parents just don't teach the art of failing to their children. You know, failure is bad. Failure means you did something wrong. You're grounded for failing. No, it's a learning experience. And at least that's the way that we always approach that.
Or it's an indicator. You know, I believe our second oldest they'd done very well in school for the most part, and then they just reached a period. So then we had to start having a conversation. Is it the subject matter? Is it is it the environment? Is it something going on in your personal life? What's happening? And it was through that process of discussion that we realized something else is going on. We ended up working with a neurologist and then getting them on medication that was helpful for them to help work through that problem. Then their grades came right back up. They were able to adjust to things. They got a 504 plan at school that we helped to shape with the school administration. And that's just it. Don't just shut down your kids and say, well, obviously you got a C, you got a D. What's going on here? What's wrong with you? Why aren't you applying yourself? Maybe they are applying themselves. It's so important to stop and say, hey, I'm seeing this drop. It's really different for you. What's going on? Do we need to do some studying? Do we need to get you in on a tutoring program? What can we do to help you? Because we're noticing this, and what you do here in school is going to eventually apply to if you want to go to college and things like that. So it's important to consider to how we can fix these things so that you can be able to achieve.
Yeah. And again, I think that all comes back down to supporting your children.
Yeah.
I think if your children feel safe at home, if they feel safe and supported, they will open up to you. And most issues can be solved through a conversation at that point. And that is the environment that we set for our children. You know, again, our oldest came out to us as gay pretty early. She was 8th grade, 9th grade, you know, I mean. And
it was not funny like, haha, that was a funny thing that happened. It was funny because I know I had noticed them being they're still together, her and her girlfriend at the time, were very close. They did a lot of things. It was a little more than just friendship, and I could definitely tell. You could definitely tell. And at one point, I know we were just joking and talking, and I said, well, when are you going to finally just tell me that you guys are dating? And it was just one of those moments where, you know, we all had a good laugh about it because we just had that kind of relationship. And so even though it was something that was probably difficult to broach on, and maybe she wasn't entirely comfortable saying it outright yet, just having that relationship and seeing that opportunity, it turned into a good conversation, and it turned into a good opportunity for us to be able to have that discussion. So.
Yeah, and flip side, her fiance's family, I mean, they dated for 9 years before she even said anything, and her parents were willfully ignorant. I mean, you go to the prom with this person, you go to homecoming with this person, you never dating any other boys or anything like that. You know, obviously, if you have a set of eyes and an open mind, you're going to understand what's going on. They didn't, and they tried to pass it off as a phase. And it's like, well, it's been a 10-year phase, so this is a pretty fucking long phase, you know, and they're still having a hard time accepting it. And it's been years since they were told. So, you know, it was interesting because her partner could see the contrast between a house that was safe, parents that were supportive. She even looks at us as parents, you know, because we've been around for so long. She's had a safe space here. You know, and then she goes to her house and it's not supportive.
Well, it's not to
chaotic.
say that they don't love her. They do obviously very much love her.
Yes.
And they are a family that cares about their children. It's just a very different, it's one of those set on expectations kind of things. It's conditional. It's conditional to a degree, and there is some of that vicarious living. And again, that's something parents have to learn to check at the door. I've had to check it at the door. I don't think any parent out there hasn't had to look at their own experience that they then tried to, well, I want to right this wrong, or I want to change this thing, or I want to have this opportunity. It's not about you anymore.
Yeah. So I know we've gone way over our normal hour, just because, well, I really love my children and I love being a parent. So I can actually talk about being a parent for, you know, a long, long time. But we did want to put something out there on at least the basics of, you know, sort of dispel some of these myths when it comes to satanic parenting and, you know, just the bullshit that you hear out there, and maybe also help people that are young, like when we first had children, are unsure or scared, or, and, you know, what are we going to do now? How is society going to treat us? And at the end of the day, I think what we figured out was you are who you are. If you pretend to be somebody you're not, it doesn't really work out very well. Mm-hmm. And people will either accept you or they won't.
Yeah, society is going to be what it is, and it's going to judge people that are different regardless of what an awesome person you might be, because too many people just don't look past the surface, and you can't change that. But what you can do is honor yourself. You could be a good example to your kids by showing self-love, self-respect, and teaching them that it's okay to be yourself.
Yeah. Yep. So with that, we won't bore you anymore with stories about our children. But again, I thought it was a really important episode because I do think there is a huge lack of material when it comes to satanic parenting. You know, and everybody's got a different style. So what we say isn't written in stone. Maybe it doesn't work for you or whatnot. You got to find your own way. But, you know, just know there are some definite do's and don'ts that are best practices, I guess I would say.
I guess to folks listening out there, if you've got insight into your parenting journey or your experiences that you want to share with us after listening to this episode, please feel free to do that. I'd love to hear your personal stories as a parent, as a Satanist, what that's been like for you.
Yep, absolutely. So with that, I'll say good day, good night, good morning, wherever the hell you're at, and hail Satan.
Hail Satan.